Welcome to the Monday Monologue. Well, today I'm going to talk about something that I hadn't really thought about before, but I've been getting a lot of requests for people saying, can you build me a chassis? Or drill me out a chassis, and get it all fabbed up and just send it to me ready to go. And that's not a service I provide. One thing, it's very time consuming. And I do all this work by hand, and it takes so long. I'd have to charge something ridiculous, probably $500 or $600 to fabricate up a chassis for someone. And even then, without having the parts on hand, I don't know where to put all the holes accurately. I'm honestly not real good at drilling accurate holes just from like a diagram. I usually do a lot of direct measuring of just, putting the transformers where I think they're going to look good and then marking the holes with a center punch. And I wouldn't want to send you something that and you wouldn't want to get something where the holes weren't accurately drilled, or when you mounted the transformers, they look goofy because I didn't have them in the tubes and everything to kind of see what it all looks like together. Like, without seeing these transformers, I might have put these things closer together and moved them over to the side a little more, and that would have looked really goofy, honestly, with this whole layout. And I think this is my 2A3 I've been working on. I still got to do a little bit of final wiring on the inside, but I decided to go ahead and put some tubes in it, kind of show you what this thing was going to look like when it's all done. And anyway, back to the fabrication. And I know people get really frustrated trying to do this fab work on their own. And one of the things I've suggested is, if you're trying to learn this stuff, is build that little headphone adapter box. It's a real simple little thing to build. Doesn't require anything that's other than a set of drill bits. You don't need, some fancy hole punches or chassis punches, or you're not cutting a square hole for an IEC connector or anything like that. And if you do mess up the chassis, they're like $15. Not a whole lot of money to have to buy another one, start over and try again. And you're going to make some mistakes. That's just a given. And, I'm always sweating it when I get down to the end of a chassis fab. Like when I've got everything all drilled out, there's 3 or 4 holes left of drilling it in the wrong place and ruining it. So that's just kind of part of this hobby or this thing. And that's why it's so satisfying when you get something finished and it looks good, that there is a lot of opportunity for mistakes. And I think more than anything, the reason people have problems is they don't want to buy the tools to do it right. And so they're trying to use like a hole saw instead of a chassis punch. And yeah, you can do that. And I'm not, some people may be really good with using a hole saw, especially if you've got a drill press. But if you don't have a drill press, you're going to have a tough time drilling a really nice looking hole, I think. At least I know I have been. And any kind of hole saw that's going to cut a super clean hole in metal like this, it's going to be really expensive. And what I'm going to pitch today is using eBay as a tool store or a tool rental store. And what made me think of this is years ago, I was installing the hardwood floor in my living room or den area, and we were putting in the real stuff, the 3/4 inch oak. We went with pre-finish so we didn't have to finish it afterwards. It had like a factory glossy finish on it. And my neighbor had done it himself as well, and he was like hand nailing it with a hammer and like a little, countersink or a little, little nail set thing, a little nail set tool. And it was just taking him forever to do it. And the boards weren't real tight together. And I knew there had to be a better way of doing it. And so I realized that they have this tool that looks like this that uses these special flooring nails that go in the little groove thing, and you basically just hold it up against the board, and then with that big mallet you smack the end of the tool and it drives the nail in, and it stops before it goes through too far and splits it. And when you hit it with the hammer, it tucks it in next to the board, that you put in previously, and you get a really professional finish. Well, those hammer tools are expensive. And I remember at the time, I think they were like $200 or $250 for a nice one. So I went to the tool rental place. And they wanted like $20 a day to rent this tool. And I guess if you were going to do the floor in a day, just do it in all one sweep, it would be worth doing that. But I knew that I was probably going to work on it here and there over a few weeks. I wasn't in a big rush. Plus, I would want to rest between. I didn't really have the physical strength to just, do 8 hours worth of hammering with that big hammer. And so that wasn't really an option. And, and I thought about, well, I don't really want to spend $200 to buy this tool to do it right. So then I looked on eBay, and I saw one, a used one, for like $100 that basically looked like new. And what I assume is someone bought it new, did their floor, then they were selling it. And then I realized what probably was more likely happening is what I did is I bought this tool for $100 on eBay, or it might have been $85. I mean, it was a very reasonable price. Used it for about a month and a half while I installed my floor, and then I sold it back on eBay for what I paid for it, and basically got a free tool rental. So I know you folks that are maybe just planning on building one amplifier, that you don't want to buy hundreds of dollars worth of new tools to be doing the chassis punching and all that fabrication work. And so you try to cut corners and, cut the holes with like a Dremel tool or something, and it ends up being just all ugly and you just get discouraged. So what I would suggest is all these chassis punches that I've got, I bought these used on eBay. And these are all like really high quality Greenlee punches or similar. Now I'm keeping them because I'm building so many different amps. But like for the small tubes, the 9 pins, this 19 millimeter, actually this is 18.4 millimeter, but a 19 millimeter or 3/4 inch works great. And then for these little vent holes, you need a 1 inch. And then this other guy is, I always forget the size of this big guy. It's let me see what this is. It's a 1 3/16. And this fits the octal sockets with the flanges on them. And I showed you in an earlier video on this 2A3, I got this really special one that cuts these holes with a keyway left in the hole to use these ones that have the retaining ring on the underneath. That's probably going to be a harder tool to find used. And it probably also be a harder tool to sell used. But these other pretty normal size ones, you could buy these on eBay, build your chassis, and then if you're not planning on doing any more work like this, sell them back on eBay. And then you're basically getting a free tool rental. And these are the kind of tools that you're not going to find at a tool rental store anyway. So this is a way of getting like the correct tools without being stuck with hundreds of dollars worth of tools you'll never use again. So that's just an idea. You are going to need a nice set of drill bits. You need some screwdrivers, and there's a whole bunch of other little tools you're going to need. But these are the real specialized ones that aren't going to be useful for doing work around the house or anything like that. And I will say, if you're going to buy a drill, if you don't have one and you don't want to buy a drill press, you can actually get a pretty reasonably priced drill press, and that really helps a lot. But if you want to just get a drill so that you can also use it around the house, the cordless ones are a lot more expensive and they don't have as much power. It's really not that much of a pain to use a corded drill. They're a whole lot cheaper for the same power level of drill. So the other thing that I'm going to be testing soon, I really haven't dug into it yet, but I want to give this thing a try. It's gotten good reviews. It's this Zotac digital oscilloscope. It's a little handheld oscilloscope, and it's got a BNC connector on the top, and it's got a lot of functions. It's got a signal generator built into it. This is a ZT702S. Haven't really tried it yet, so that's going to be something I'm going to be exploring here soon, and that might be something helpful if you don't have the money to buy like an Analog Discovery 2, to be doing like the full suite of distortion tests and all that kind of stuff. This can help you troubleshoot and make sure your amp's performing like it's supposed to. So anyway, I think this 2A3 amp turned out really nice, and I actually like the way this looks and this layout looks. I like the output tubes spaced out a little further than I have in the past. I think it kind of makes a nice symmetry. These are all PSvane Horizon tubes that we're going to be trying. Some 6SL7, these Coke bottle shaped, I call them, or ST bottle, and I think they match well with the shape of the 2A3. And then we're going to be using a 5V4G for the rectifier tube, which has the same kind of shape. So I think that's kind of a fun matchup of tubes. We may end up having to go to a 5AR4 to get the right voltage, but I'm going to start with this one and see where we end up. The little meter turned out nice. I still wish it had a little trim ring around it, and I may work with some folks trying to fabricate up some of these. I need to find some ring that's close to the right size that we can then mill down to work with this. And I may have found one, but that's kind of a work in progress. But for now, I think this looks pretty nice. It's not the cleanest thing in the world, but it definitely doesn't look bad. And so I'm happy with that. These little rings and the volume control come from Yoda Electronics. I'll put the link below. They're a great place to get knobs and these rings, and I actually buy a lot of tubes from them. They got a really good prices on some tubes that are hard to find now. So the other thing I want to give you an update on, I know some of y'all are aware I've had some medical problems this spring, and those are basically behind me. I haven't had any more trouble with the stuff in my body that was causing. Didn't end up having cancer, so that was a bonus, obviously. And the surgery they did on my hand, you can just barely see the little scar, and it's all working like it's supposed to again. I'm not sure I've got quite the grip that I used to have in this hand, but there's no pain, so I'll take that any day of the week. But I do have an issue. My boyfriend has got a monster kidney stone, and they're going to have to surgically deal with it. It's like, I think they said an 11 millimeter kidney stone, that's like almost 7/16 of an inch. That's a giant kidney stone. So I'm going to be dealing with him for a couple of weeks, and then I have a convention that's related to my elected official city council stuff down in Savannah later this month. And so starting about a week from now, I'm probably going to have another Monday monologue, but then it might be a couple of weeks before we have another one. So don't worry about me if you don't see anything for a little bit. Got stuff I've got to deal with. Life just kind of gets in the way sometimes. So anyway, I am going full steam ahead on building stuff. Like I said, I got this 2A3 done because I actually had the transformers and stuff here to do this, but this gave me a good prototype to use for my 300B amp. Had kind of a slow year on amplifier orders, but I honestly think it's got the economy. People are just kind of hesitant to be spending money right now. At least that's what I'm thinking. And I did have an order for a 300B amp that's going to be built very similar to this one. And then I got another customer that wants a really high-end one using the ISO Tango iron and stuff. And I got deposits on both of those. So those are going to get built. And I decided to go ahead and order about $4,000 worth of parts, chassis, transformers, and stuff to kind of stockpile some phono stages, get some more of those EL34 amps done, and get the stuff to build these other 300B amps and see how they turn out. And I'm sure they're going to work great. And like I said, this to me turned out to be a nice kind of prototype chassis for my, I'm going to call it my standard 300B, that's going to have like musical power supply, output transformers. It's going to have DC heaters, but they're not going to be regulated DC. They're just going to be, DC filtered DC heaters. And the rest of this is going to look like this, which I think looks really nice. And I'm going to spend the time detailing, doing nice paint work on the iron and stuff, and try to make all that as nice as I can within the budget. And I may have someone that's going to be able to do some smaller batch powder coating for me. Right now, the place I'm using has a $300 minimum, so I've got to take kind of a big batch of stuff over there at a time. And they all have to be like the same color. They want to just like kind of production line it. I mean, it's nice. I don't have to do any of the prep work or anything. I just take the stuff over there and they, scuff them down and etch them or whatever they do. So the powder coating sticks really good. And then, I just go pick them up and they look beautiful. But when I do have something smaller or I want to try something different, then that's not really an option, having the $300 minimum. And so I want to experiment with the coatings at Prismatic Powder, I think it is, or Prismatic Coating. They had some really cool looking powder coat finishes that you can buy, and you can buy the powder like a pound at a time. And so I may try some different colors of chassis and stuff like that in the future, and just maybe get a little more creative, do a little different kind of stuff. So that's going to be fun. And again, like I said, I'm going to take this time when the sales are kind of slow to build up some inventory so that when folks do want to buy something, that I've got it in stock and I can just ship it. I don't have to, there's no wait, much less a 3-year wait, but might not even be any wait. I could mail it out the next day. And I'm planning on stocking up on like the silver trim EL34s that have the standard transformers, build a couple with the ISO Tango iron, and then I want to get like this standard 300B kind of thing sorted out. And hopefully these musical power supply transformers work out. They've worked out really good on my EL34 amps, and I don't doubt they're going to sound good on this 300B amp too. And hope this 2A3 turns out nice. Might even sell some of those. So anyway, I think that's kind of it for this week. I don't really have a great music suggestion for this week planned, and so I guess we'll skip that for this week. And just really appreciate all you folks that are regular viewers, giving me encouragement on this 2A3 build. Got some really nice comments on that, so I really appreciate that. And we're almost at 20,000 subs. I think I'm at 19K 300, and my goal is to hit 20K by the middle of the summer, and I think we're going to hit it. So that'll be a nice milestone for the channel. And again, I appreciate all you Patreon supporters. And again, I super appreciate you folks that give me donations at the website. I'm always kind of, I don't know if I should be shocked, but I'm always just so appreciative when I log into my email and I see somebody's dropped a donation on my website just because they found value in my content and wanted to help me out. And that really helps me afford to, buy stuff to build some of this, more esoteric kind of stuff. And and I do have plans on my 6C33C. I decided to put a full voltage on both sides of the tube and run it maxed out instead of trying to run just half of it. And I think that's going to solve the problems I was having. So yeah, I've got the heater transformer coming from that, and I appreciate Mark lending me some chokes to try, which turned out really wasn't the problem. I think it's more with the output tube, but we'll figure that out. And yeah, we're just building amps and having fun. So anyway, thanks again for being a subscriber, and we will see you next week for the Monday Monologue.